The Monday edition of Business Morning on Channels Television, broadcasting live from Lagos, Nigeria. Well, crude oil theft has become a huge threat to Nigeria's economy, costing the nation billions of dollars every month. But another worrisome issue is the development of alternate sources of energy supply by major buyers of Nigeria's black gold. Now, one of these alternatives that most Nigerians may not be all too familiar with, but have heard about, is shale oil. It's actually spelled S-H-A-L-E, shale oil. Now, we may not know so much about shale oil, but it is expected to be the next energy revolution. Joining me now on the show to talk more about this alternate source and its implication on Nigeria's economy as well as global oil prices is an economist and a senior research fellow at Lagos Business School, Dr. Bongo Adi. Thank you so much, Doctor, for joining us this morning.
Thank you very much.
Well, let's start with generally assessing the current global oil conditions right now.
Okay. We have witnessed a whole lot of activities in the oil sector globally in the past 1 month, especially an increase in non-OPEC oil supplies, which has risen up to by 570,000 barrels in July. That's giving non-OPEC countries about 55 million barrels per day of crude supplies. So that leaves OPEC with the target of 30 million. But even at that, put it together, that's still about 85 million barrels per day of crude supply available in the market right now. But the global demand for crude oil is about 100 million barrels. So there's still a deficit in the market. And another interesting thing is that the U.S. seems to be dominating the non-OPEC supply. It's producing about 40%, almost half of the non-OPEC oil supply globally. So I think that's some interest. And then OPEC supply has decreased because of unrest in the Niger Delta area of Nigeria and in some parts of Algeria as well. So because of this, OPEC has not been able to meet its target of 30 million barrels per day of crude supply. So there is a shortfall of about 2 or 3 million barrels.
Now, on a scale of 1 to 100, how much of a threat is this to Nigeria's economy?
It depends on how you look at it. I wouldn't say overall that it is a big threat. It depends on how you look at it, and I think I'll dwell more on that later on in this discussion. Yes, if you follow the frenzy in the news, you might conclude that Nigeria's oil future is being severely threatened by what is happening globally. But I don't think very much so, because we are talking about shale oil.
Yes, well, we're going to get to that in just a moment, because there's been so much talk about shale oil and the fact that major buyers, for instance, the United States, because that's where they seem to be producing so much of it, between 40 to 60% of shale oil is being produced there, and they are our top buyers. Okay, so if they reduce the amount they buy from Nigeria, that's definitely cause for concern. But I think I'm getting ahead of myself here. Let's just even understand what shale oil is all about and why the United States and the UK and some other countries seem to be in a furore about it.
Of course, that's very obvious. America has been concerned about its oil dependence for more than a century now. Since 1944, they've been looking for an alternative to fossil fuel, but they haven't found it yet. And I don't think that shale oil offers them that yet. Now, shale oil, to put it simply, is oil from sedimentary rock. And you have sedimentary rock everywhere in Nigeria, in the Nupe Basin, in the Anambra Basin, in the Dahomey Basin, in the Chad Trough, as well as in the Niger Delta Basin. I mean, you have sedimentary rocks all over Nigeria. So shale oil is oil, unconventional oil, which is extracted through a process known as pyrolysis or hydrogenation. I mean, that is the subjection of the rock to intense heat, which doesn't just decompose the rock, but dissolves the molecular constitution of the rock, through which you now get oil. The same pyrolysis process could also be used to generate oil from waste tire, rubber, plastics. So that's a very common technology. It's not new, but the thing is that there has been some advancement in that technology that made it a little bit more efficient to use it to produce oil.
But just before we continue, it's still the same problem of degradation of the environment, isn't it?
Of course it is. So we haven't talked about that, but let us look at the economic viability of shale oil production in the first instance. Yes, exploration is very cheap. It's not so costly as exploring for fossil fuel. But to extract the oil is not locked somewhere inside the ground that you just have to drill a hole to push it out. Okay, that is not the way it is. Okay. You have to get the rock, you have to subject it to heat, and then it has to dissolve. And again, it requires special pipelines to transport. Okay, right now the infrastructure is still not readily available. Since 1944, the U.S. has been prospecting for shale oil. Shale oil is not new, by the way. As far back as the 14th century, people have been using shale oil.
But we know it's not just the United States that's also prospecting for shale oil.
Of course. China, New Zealand, Australia, even Great Britain. I think David Cameron gave a license for companies to start processing shale sedimentary rocks into shale oil recently. So it's not something new, but I think what we need to worry about is not really the conversion of shale oil, shale rock into oil, but rather about the technological shift. Because what has enabled shale oil to come up in the international balance of power is simply because of the discovery of a new technology which some call hydrogenation, or hydraulic pressure, and horizontal drilling. Up to now, the conventional drilling technology is vertical drilling, but the U.S. seems to have perfected the horizontal drilling technology. So that makes oil wells to produce more. So they are able to reach to hitherto unreachable oil in the ground. So even when that technology is deployed in our oil wells here, we can also we can enhance the productivity of our own wells. So I don't think that technology is unique only to the United States. It's only a matter of time before it is deployed all over the world in the oil industry. So that is what I would like to say is actually the revolution in that sector, so not shale oil in itself. So
could we possibly see that revolution here in Nigeria as well?
Yes, it's possible. It's very possible. Yeah, but I don't know how long it's going to take. Okay. But whether shale oil is going to be the thing, the next big thing, I still don't feel so. Right now, U.S. uses about 18 million barrels of crude per day. Okay, shale oil has been able to give them 5 million barrels in the last couple of months. Okay, and total oil production in the U.S. is about 7.6 million barrels per day. So there's still a huge gap. So
somebody needs to fill that.
Yes.
Somebody needs to fill that huge gap.
Of course.
But then, well, I get this feeling, and I'm very sure lots of people, would share this sentiment, that rising shale oil production just might affect global oil prices.
Not just rising shale oil production, but we can say that the technology that has enhanced the productivity of oil wells could actually lead to more oil supplies. But like I've said, right now we have about 100 million barrels of crude oil demand per day. But out of that, what is currently being made as we are talking is about 85 million barrels per day.
But then it could also affect the price, because right now, as of this morning, oil is currently trading at around $107, $108 per barrel. So could this possibly make it rise or make it fall?
It depends on where you are on the international political economy ideology debate. Okay, some people feel that oil price is not determined by the laws of supply and demand.
Oh, really?
Okay, and I believe that. So because if you go by the economic principle of relative scarcity, oil, given its uses, should actually cost more than gold and diamond. But how much is oil sold? And over time, we remember the oil shocks of 1973, 1979, how the OECD countries, led by the United States, broke the back of OPEC. and so that they could manipulate oil prices. And they've been doing that all this while. So I don't believe that oil prices respond to the laws of supply and demand that you and I are familiar with. So given that, again, if the U.S. Begins to produce a whole lot of oil, will we still see the era of low oil price? That's a question that we haven't asked. And then what will be the impact that will have on manufacturing that is heavily fossil fuel dependent?
That's in the U.S.
Even in the U.S. and all over the world, manufacturing is still dependent. So we can actually have a very optimistic scenario that will favor everybody.
So the Nigerian government now, should they also be looking at an optimistic scenario? Because, based on the fact that the United States is one of their major buyers of the crude oil, should they be worried that, the current global oil market situation might impact negatively on the economy?
Yeah, I think they really need to be concerned with their inability to meet even their own supply obligations. Okay, the OPEC quota to Nigeria is about 2.3 million barrels per day. But because of the problems in the Niger Delta area, we have not been able to meet that. I don't know how long, but I think between 2009 and 2011, Nigeria lost about 11 billion US dollars
That's
to
according to
oil
the
theft,
yes.
according to the data. So if we're not able, and I don't know how many barrels per day that we lose, but it's a huge amount. I think we are not producing up to 1.5 million barrels per day as it is right now. So we need to worry about that. If we meet our own quota, I think there is still a robust demand in the international oil market.
Well, let's hold your thoughts for me for a couple of minutes and we'll be right back to look at this topic. You're still watching Business Morning on Channels Television, and I'm talking to an economist and senior research fellow from the Lagos Business School, Dr. Bongo Adi, and we're looking at developments on the international oil market and its impact on the Nigerian economy. Business Morning will continue.